It was supposed to be just another flight. Passengers boarding, seats filling, and a flight attendant doing her routine checks. Everything seemed normal, until a quiet, confident black woman in seat 14C caught the attendant's attention. Dressed in a casual blazer with a carry-on that looked a bit too official, she didn't say much. But there was something about her that didn't sit right with the attendant. Moments later, whispers started among the crew. Then came the accusation. Something was missing from the first-class cabin, and the flight attendant claimed she knew exactly who took it. The woman didn't flinch, no panic, no confusion, just a slow blink, almost like she expected this. What no one knew, not the passengers, not the pilot, and definitely not the flight attendant, was that this woman was more than just a traveler. She was a deep-cover CIA agent, mid-mission, using the flight as a crucial part of her operation. The flight attendant, thinking she was exposing a criminal, had no idea she was actually walking straight into the middle of a federal operation. As tension rises and eyes shift towards seat 14C, the woman calmly places her hands on her tray table. The flight attendant demands her bag. The woman meets her eyes and, with a small smirk, says 5 words that change everything. "You really don't want this." Now the cabin is silent. The plane hasn't even taken off. But the real journey, the one filled with secrets, betrayal, and high-stakes espionage, has just begun. What happens when the one being framed turns out to be the most dangerous person on board? Stay tuned. This story is just getting started. The flight attendant froze. For a split second, her confident posture cracked. She didn't know why those 5 words hit so hard, but something about the woman's calm tone made her second-guess everything. Passengers nearby turned their heads, sensing something wasn't right. A businessman across the aisle slowly lowered his headphones. A mother clutched her child's hand a little tighter. It felt like the air inside the plane had shifted. The woman in 14C still hadn't moved. Her ID read Maya Brooks, but that wasn't her real name. The CIA gave her that alias months ago when this assignment began. Maya had been tracking an international smuggling ring, and intel suggested one of its key members might be flying on this very route. She couldn't blow her cover, not yet. But now, because of the false accusation, her entire mission was at risk. Meanwhile, the flight attendant, whose name tag read Claire, stepped back and spoke into her walkie, requesting a quiet alert to the captain. She was convinced something was off about Maya. Maybe it wasn't just the missing item. Maybe it was her stillness, her silence. Claire had seen nervous passengers before, but this was different. This woman looked like she was waiting. What Claire didn't know was that someone else on the plane was guilty. Someone had planted something in the overhead bin above Maya's seat, hoping to create a distraction, and it was working. As security prepared to meet the plane during its layover, Maya was already thinking 2 steps ahead. She had seen a face in the crowd, someone she recognized from a surveillance photo. If she moved too soon, her cover would be blown. If she waited too long, the real threat might vanish. The clock was ticking. Maya kept her eyes steady, watching Claire's every move without turning her head. She had been trained to stay calm under pressure, but even for her, this was cutting it close. She didn't expect interference this early, not from the crew. The flight hadn't even left the runway, and already her mission was spiraling into unknown territory. She shifted slightly in her seat, not enough to draw attention, just enough to see the man sitting 2 rows back. Clean-shaven, casual clothes, pretending to scroll through his phone, but his fingers hadn't moved for a while. Maya had seen his face before, not in real life, but in a classified file. He wasn't just a suspect, he was dangerous. And now he was watching her. Claire, still holding the walkie, whispered something to another attendant. They nodded and started walking slowly toward Maya's seat, pretending to check overhead bins. Maya's bag was still there, untouched, but it wouldn't be for long. Claire had convinced herself she was doing the right thing. She didn't know Maya was deep undercover, with encrypted data hidden inside the lining of her carry-on. She didn't know Maya had been following a cold trail for weeks, and this flight was her one shot at making contact. All she saw was a woman sitting too still, too calm, and that made her suspicious. As the engines started to hum and the plane prepared to taxi, Maya's instincts kicked in. Her training told her to stay seated. Her gut said otherwise. There was something off, not just about the man in row 16, but the way Claire kept glancing toward the front. Was someone else involved? A second player? Maybe even someone on the crew? The pieces weren't fitting yet, but Maya could feel it. Something bigger was at play, and she was right in the middle of it. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane began to taxi down the runway. Maya's fingers tapped lightly on her armrest, not from nerves, but timing. Every second mattered now. She noticed the man in row 16 shift slightly, angling his body toward the aisle. He wasn't scrolling anymore. He was watching, waiting, maybe even listening. Maya's earpiece was silent, standard procedure during commercial transport, but her instincts screamed louder than any command. Claire reappeared beside her with a forced smile and a slightly trembling hand. "Ma'am, I need you to step to the front with me for a quick check." Her voice was calm, but her eyes darted toward the cockpit, like someone had given her instructions she didn't fully understand. Maya didn't move. She knew this wasn't about a missing item anymore. Something had been triggered, protocols she wasn't supposed to trip, which meant someone was pulling strings behind the curtain. But who? The man in 16C stood up suddenly, pretending to reach for his bag. It was too early in the flight for that, and Maya knew it. She rose slowly, locking eyes with Claire, then glancing past her shoulder to the galley door. Another crew member had quietly positioned himself near the exit, blocking it like it was just routine. It wasn't. Passengers were beginning to sense the tension, whispering behind headrests, stealing glances at Maya. The mother with a child clutched her bag. The businessman slid off his headphones completely. Claire took a step forward. Maya didn't flinch. She scanned the aisle. Exit rows. Emergency gear. Lines of sight. She could feel it now. Something was about to go down. Whether it was a setup, an ambush, or the start of something far bigger than even she had prepared for, one thing was certain. This flight wasn't going to be ordinary. And whatever was coming next, it was already in motion. Just as Maya was about to take a step forward, the cabin lights flickered. Not long, just a quick blink, but long enough to set off every alarm in her head. She looked up. It wasn't turbulence. It wasn't a coincidence. That flicker meant someone on board was accessing the plane's systems, internally, from the inside. Her eyes darted back to row 16. The man wasn't there anymore. He was gone. Maya pivoted in place, scanning the aisle. He had moved toward the rear of the plane. Quiet. Unnoticed. That was no ordinary passenger. That was someone trained, someone who knew how to disappear in plain sight. Claire followed Maya's gaze and froze too. For the first time, it was clear she wasn't just suspicious anymore. She was scared. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the intercom, but it wasn't the captain. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor technical issue. Please remain seated." It was a male voice. Calm, but wrong. Maya knew the captain's voice from boarding. This wasn't it. She turned slowly, putting the pieces together faster than she could say them out loud. The man in 16C hadn't just moved. He had made it to the cockpit. The flight wasn't just compromised. It was being hijacked. But this wasn't a typical hijacking. There were no loud threats, no panic, no weapons in sight. This was something far more dangerous. Silent control. Someone had slipped past security, past the crew, and now possibly had access to the cockpit systems. Maya's mission had just changed. She was no longer tracking a suspect. She was inside an unfolding operation. And worse, someone knew who she was. Maybe not her real name, but enough to frame her, isolate her, and keep her locked in while the real threat made his move. And that meant only one thing. She wasn't the only agent on board. Maya moved fast. She pushed past Claire, who no longer tried to stop her. The flight attendant had realized too late that whatever game she thought she was playing, she'd been used. Maya made her way down the aisle with calm urgency, eyes scanning for any sign of the man from 16C. He wasn't near the rear of the plane. That meant he'd gone forward, toward the cockpit. She reached into her blazer and tapped a hidden button near the seam. A small buzz in her ear confirmed the signal went through. The agency's silent alarm. Backup would be waiting on the ground, but she had to hold the situation until then. As she approached the front, another surprise waited, the cockpit door now ajar. That was never supposed to happen mid-flight. Inside, the pilot sat still, hands off the controls, while the man from 16C, now holding a disguised electronic device, was speaking into the radio. Not to air traffic control, to someone else. Maya didn't hesitate. She stepped inside and aimed her voice like a weapon. "That's enough." The man turned, startled, but not by her presence. He looked at her with recognition. "You're early," he said calmly. "You're sloppy," she shot back. In one smooth move, Maya reached for the device and ripped out the power source. The cabin lights flickered again, then stabilized. The pilot let out a breath he'd been holding for too long. But before Maya could secure the man, the final twist landed. Claire appeared at the cockpit entrance, holding a small, identical device in her hand. Her expression had changed. No longer afraid, cold, controlled. "You weren't the only one with a mission," she said quietly. Maya's heart pounded. The hijacker wasn't working alone. He was a distraction. Claire had been the real handler all along. And the plane was still in play. Maya didn't move. Her eyes locked with Claire's, both of them silently calculating the next move. The man behind Maya took a step forward, but she held up a hand without looking. "Don't," she warned. Claire tilted her head, the calm confidence now fully exposed. "You weren't supposed to be on this flight," she said, "but I guess the agency wanted to test both of us." It clicked. Claire wasn't just a flight attendant, she was deep cover too. But for a rogue route Maya had been tracking from the start, they had embedded operatives in global transport lines, smuggling data and tech using everyday flights. The missing item? A fake story to trigger attention. The planted device? A decoy. And Maya? A threat they wanted to eliminate from the inside. But they underestimated her. "I already called it in," Maya said. "Your network's exposed. They'll be waiting at the next gate." Claire smiled faintly, then dropped the device. "Then I guess we're done here." She raised her hands slowly as Maya moved in. Within seconds, Claire was cuffed with zip ties from the emergency kit, and the cockpit was secured. The co-pilot regained control. The real captain returned from his break after being locked in the crew rest area, and the passengers were none the wiser. By the time the plane landed, federal agents were waiting on the tarmac. Claire and the man from 16C were taken into custody quietly. No alarms, no panic. Just another flight arriving slightly ahead of schedule. As Maya stepped off the plane, she took a deep breath of cool night air. The mission was complete. The threat neutralized. But one thing stuck with her. Sometimes, the real danger isn't the one making noise. It's the one serving drinks and smiling back. And that flight she'd never forget.